I was 26 the summer it happened, burned out from work, and the kind of stress that makes you forget what silence even feels like. So when my uncle offered me his beach house on the Outer Banks for a full week, no cost, no conditions, I accepted before he even finished the sentence. The place wasn't fancy, but it had a charm that made you feel like you were stepping into someone else's peaceful life. Weathered grey siding, sea-beaten railings, and a wraparound deck that looked straight out over the Atlantic. Every board in the house creaked with age, and the inside was filled with thrift store wicker furniture that smelled faintly of coconut sunscreen and old wood. During the day, the place felt like a little sanctuary carved out of the coastline. I'd sit on the deck with a cold drink, let the sun heat my shoulders, and just exist for the first time in months. The rhythmic crash of waves, the sharp cries of gulls overhead, the smell of salt thick in the air. All of it made me feel like I was finally breathing again. But nighttime on the coast is different. The ocean stops being pretty and becomes a black, moving void. The wind sounds like whispers pushing through the dunes. The wooden frame of the house pops and rattles like something is trying to get in. Even the air feels different, colder, heavier, like it's pressing closer to your skin. And it was during those nights, in that silence, that I started noticing the lights. The second night, I stepped onto the deck with a beer around 10:30 p.m., hoping the sound of the waves would help me wind down. There was no moon and no stars. Just a pitch-black sky draped over a pitch-black ocean. Then, in the distance, something flickered. At first, I thought it was a fishing boat, a cluster of faint white lights hovering near the horizon. But as I watched, confusion crept in. The lights were too high, not above the water but over it, maybe 30 or 40 feet in the air. They didn't drift like boats. They didn't rock or sway. They moved in sharp, mathematical motions, shifting left, then right, then stopping dead still, as if they were studying something below them. I sat there for nearly an hour, beer warm in my hand, my eyes locked on the strange glow. Sometimes the lights blinked out entirely, only to reappear farther down the coast seconds later. Sometimes they split apart, drifting away from each other like seeds blowing in the wind, then snapped back into formation as if tethered together by something unseen. I tried, really tried, to convince myself it was some kind of Coast Guard operation or drones being tested, but I'd never seen anything move with that kind of precision. And deep down in the pit of my stomach, I knew it wasn't anything man-made. I went to bed uneasy, every shadow in the room suddenly feeling unfamiliar. The third night, I awoke to a sound I couldn't explain. Tap. A pause. Tap, tap. Not the wind, not sand hitting the siding, not branches. There were barely any trees near the house. It sounded deliberate, like someone tapping their knuckles lightly, but intentionally against the outside wall. My heart kicked hard in my chest. I got out of bed and crept to the front window, keeping low. When I lifted the blinds just an inch to peek through, the lights were back, but this time they were close. Just past the breaking waves, maybe 100 feet from the shore, hovering. Silent, cold white halos floating above the water. As I watched, Trying to steady my breathing, something moved on the sand. Figures. 3 of them. They walked with slow, steady steps, their silhouettes glowing faintly, as if their skin was absorbing the light from above and pushing it outward. No flashlights, no voices, no hesitation. They weren't wandering. They were moving with purpose, and that purpose was the line of houses along the beach. The line of houses that included mine. I ducked down before they could see me, my pulse pounding so hard I felt it in my ears. I slid backward until my spine hit the wall, listening to the sand outside shift beneath their feet. Except it didn't sound like footsteps, so there was no crunching of sand, no sound at all. 3 glowing figures, moving silently, straight toward me. I shut off every light in the house and dropped to the floor beside the couch. Through the smallest crack in the blinds, I watched the 3 figures cross the dunes and step onto the wooden deck. Their movements were raw, fluid, but too controlled, like their limbs were connected by invisible wires, their joints bending in ways that made my stomach twist. One of them stopped directly in front of my window. Even through the blinds I could see the faint glow of its face. Its skin looked stretched thin, almost translucent, and its eyes hollow, wide, reflective, locked onto the window like it was looking through it. The figure leaned forward slowly, its head tilted, listening, and then it lifted one hand, long, impossibly narrow fingers, and lightly tapped the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Not forceful, not frantic, just testing. I clenched my jaw to keep from making any sound. My breathing felt too loud, and I found myself terrified that it might sense it somehow. The tapping stopped, but the figure didn't move away. It lingered, inches from the window, its fingers still resting on the glass, like it could feel something pulsing beneath it. I stayed frozen until my muscles ached. After the longest minute of my life, the figure finally straightened. It turned its head slightly, not like a person does, but in one smooth, continuous motion, and stepped back. The other 2 joined it. For several seconds, the 3 of them stood together, facing the house, their glowing outlines flickering as the lights above the water pulsed in response. Then they moved, perfectly synchronized, back across the deck, down the dunes, across the sand. When they reached the shoreline, the lights above the water pulsed twice, slow, deliberate, and then blinked out all at once. The beach fell into total darkness, so complete it felt like the horizon didn't exist anymore. I stayed on the floor until dawn, too afraid to even blink, let alone look outside again. The moment the first sliver of daylight hit the ocean, I bolted up, grabbed my bag, and packed with shaking hands. I didn't even fold anything, just shoved clothes into my suitcase and ran out the door. I didn't breathe normally until I was 20 miles inland. When I finally told my uncle what happened, he just laughed it off and said locals had all kinds of ghost stories about strange lights offshore. Old tales about shipwrecked sailors, lost vessels, or government experiments nobody talked about openly. He said it like it was nothing. But I know what I saw, and I know what stood on that sand, what tapped on that glass, what knew I was inside. I try not to think about it, but it follows me sometimes, especially late at night, when everything is quiet and the world feels thin. That sound returns, soft, patient, remembering me. Tap, tap, tap. My aunt had offered me the beach house as if it was some kind of blessing, a quiet place to recover from months of burnout, noise, and the slow suffocation of life in the city. I expected peace, solitude, a few nights of ocean breeze and overpriced wine. But the very moment I stepped inside, I felt rejected, like the house itself didn't want me there. The place was old and carried that mix of salt, wood wrought, and something faintly sweet, something that didn't belong. The floorboards creaked in long, drawn-out whines as I walked, as if complaining with every step. The house sat on stilts, with the ocean only a few dozen yards away. At night, waves slammed the shore, hard enough to shake the windows. During the day, sunlight poured in so brightly that everything looked washed out, almost dreamlike. My aunt had given me a ring of keys, but she didn't explain any of them. Most were old brass things, cold and tarnished, and one of them, long, heavy, iron, looked like it belonged in a church basement door, not a beach house. And then I saw it. At the end of the upstairs hallway, past the guest rooms at a narrow bathroom, stood a door that didn't match the rest of the house. The other doors were thin wood-painted pastel colors, their knobs loose and easy to turn. But this one, it was solid, dark, reinforced. A heavy bar of metal ran across its surface, and a deadbolt the size of a fist held it shut. Someone had reinforced the frame with fresh wood recently. There were scratch marks around the lock, long ones, deep. "You won't need to go in there," my aunt had said casually earlier, but she hadn't said it like instruction, she'd said it like warning. The first night I tried to ignore the door. I made dinner, poured wine, walked on the porch until the air grew cold, and finally crawled into bed. But at 3:04 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something heavy sliding across the upstairs hallway, slow, dragging, as if someone were pulling their feet across the carpet in long, lazy shuffles. It stopped right outside my bedroom. I held my breath for nearly a minute, and then the footsteps continued down the hall until they stopped at the locked room. I didn't sleep again. Morning sunlight didn't make me feel any better. If anything, the brightness only made the night feel more unreal, like I'd dreamed the whole thing. But when I stepped into the hallway, the carpet told another story. There was a visible path in the carpet fibers, a long, unmistakable trail, from my bedroom door, straight to the locked room. I stared at it for longer than I should have. That's when I noticed something else. The deadbolt on the locked door was slightly tilted, as if someone had tried to turn it from the inside. I ate breakfast in silence, my stomach twisting constantly. Every creak of the house made me jump. The waves outside sounded heavier, almost pounding rather than crashing, and the locked room loomed over everything. By noon, curiosity began fighting fear. I wasn't proud of it, but I found myself standing in front of that door, with the ring of keys in my hand. My fingers brushed over the heavy iron one. I didn't dare try it. Because if the key worked, if the door opened, I wasn't sure I wanted to see what was waiting on the other side. So I told myself a lie. I'll deal with it tonight. If something happens again, I'll call my aunt. Nothing happened during the day, but at night, the house woke up. At 2:51 a.m., the dragging started again. This time, slower, deliberate. As if whatever was moving wanted me to know it was awake. I sat up in bed, blanket clutched to my chest. The footsteps reached my door, paused, and then the doorknob turned. I'd locked it, thank God I'd locked it. The knob rattled sharply, once, twice, then a long, forceful tug. I slapped a hand over my mouth, terrified I'd make a sound. The rattling stopped. The footsteps drifted down the hall. And then I heard knocking. Soft, rhythmic knocking. Not on my door. On the locked one. From the inside. I barely slept, but morning finally arrived, and for the first time, I seriously considered leaving. My hands shook as I made coffee, and I couldn't bring myself to go upstairs again. Yet by afternoon, dread turned into a kind of desperate resolve. I needed answers, so I confronted the door again. I checked the deadbolt. It wasn't damaged, but the wood around the frame, freshly reinforced, looked slightly warped, like something had pushed against it repeatedly from the other side. I called my aunt. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "What's in the locked room upstairs?" Her breath hitched. Barely audible, but I heard it. "Just storage," she said, too fast, too rehearsed. "Then why is it locked with a deadbolt? Why does the frame look reinforced?" There was a long silence. Finally, she exhaled shakily. "It's nothing you need to worry about. Just don't open it." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, pulse thundering. Something was wrong. Something she didn't want to admit. So, I set a test. Before bed, I sprinkled baking flour across the hallway, floor thin, even covering everything from my door to the locked room. I pushed a chair under my doorknob, and then I waited. I fell asleep at some point. I don't remember how, but at 3:17 a.m., I snapped awake. The dragging sound was back. My blood turned to ice. The footsteps shuffled through the flour. I could hear the grains brushing, the soft, crushing sound of something moving slowly through it. The shadow under my door darkened. It was right outside. My door handle twitched. The chair shook. Once, twice. Hard enough that the wood creaked. Then silence, followed by the slow retreat of dragging footsteps, until they reached the locked room. And then came the voices, whispering, multiple, layered, sharp like nails dragged over glass, but low, urgent, as if arguing. I cried silently, pulling my knees to my chest. At some point, the whispers stopped. The footsteps faded. I waited until sunrise before daring to open my door. The hallway was a horror show. Drag marks carved through the flour. Not footprints, not human stride, but something that moved by pulling itself forward unevenly. The trail led directly to the locked room. But what made my skin crawl, what made my heart plunge, was this. There were drag marks coming from under the locked door, as if something inside had slid out, joined the thing in the hall, and then retreated back in. I left the house that same morning. I packed quickly, barely able to breathe as I kept glancing over my shoulder at the staircase. The entire house felt charged, like something was waiting for night to fall again, like something was listening. As I backed out of the driveway, I didn't look at the upstairs window. I didn't want to know if anything or anyone was watching. 3 days later, I returned the keys to my aunt. She stared at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. "You didn't sleep well, did you?" she asked quietly. I swallowed hard. "What's in that room?" I whispered. Her face paled. She didn't answer at first. Then softly, "There are things in this world that don't stay put unless they're kept behind a door. And some doors." She looked down at the keys trembling in my hands. "Should never be opened." She never said another word. And I never went back, but sometimes late at night, when I'm half asleep, drifting toward dreams, I swear I still hear it. A dragging sound. Slow, deliberate, and then faint, unmistakable. Knock, knock, from the inside. The summer I turned 21 was supposed to be one of those transitional, unforgettable chapters of my life. The kind you look back on years later and think, yeah, that was freedom. A group of close friends and I had scraped together enough money to rent a tiny beach house for a week. The cheapest one we could find that wasn't falling apart completely. It leaned to one side, the paint peeling in long strips from the siding. The porch sagged in places where boards had rotted through, and the 2 bedrooms inside felt more like storage closets than spaces meant for sleeping. But none of that mattered. It sat just a few yards from the ocean, and from the porch you could hear the waves clearly enough that they became a constant backdrop, steady, rhythmic, and calming in a way only the shoreline can be. The first couple of days were pure summer cliché. We grilled cheap burgers, swam until the sun dipped low and our shoulders burned, and watched the sky turn orange-pink every evening while someone passed around a cooler of beers. At night we built bonfires on the sand, the flames bending in the sea breeze, while we told exaggerated stories and stupid jokes. Everything felt light, easy, uncomplicated. The first sign of something strange came on the 3rd night. We were huddled around the fire. Me, Jess, Alex, and a few others, listening to the crackle of embers and the hollow echo of the tide. Jess was mid-sentence when her voice suddenly faded. She stared past me, toward the shoreline. "Do you see that?" she whispered. We all turned. At first I thought it was another group of people farther down the coast. Maybe someone carrying lanterns or flashlights on a night walk. But then I realized something was off. The lights weren't shaped like beams or lantern glows. They weren't even behaving like light should. It was a line of faint orbs, soft, flickering, almost pulsing, moving gently along the shoreline, as if drifting on an invisible track. They hovered above the sand, not casting shadows, not reflecting on the water, and not bright enough to illuminate anything around them. And they moved perfectly in sync. A straight, deliberate formation. None of us spoke at first. We just watched as the line traveled slowly along the beach until the lights faded one by one into the darkness, like embers carried off by the wind. Someone finally broke the silence. "Probably people fishing," Alex said, though his voice lacked conviction. Jess, still staring at the shoreline, shook her head. "No one walks in a line like that." We've finished the night, pretending it wasn't strange, but the image clung to me. The way the lights floated, silent and weightless, the perfect formation. The fact that they didn't illuminate anything, not the sand, not the waves, not even themselves. It didn't feel like something people made. It felt like something watching. The next day passed uneventfully. Swimming, lunch, a few lazy hours sprawled across the porch. No one mentioned the lights. It was easier to file them away as a trick of distance or too much beer. But when midnight came and we found ourselves at the bonfire again, Jess nudged me with a tense look. "They're back." The lights reappeared in the exact same spot on the shoreline as the night before. Same number of awns, same gliding motion, same eerie precision. Only this time, I wasn't content to sit and watch. I pulled out my flashlight, raised it toward the lights, and flicked it on and off, twice quick bursts, aimed directly at the formation. A dumb idea, probably fueled by too much bravado and the comfort of having friends around. But the second I did it, the lights reacted. They stopped. Not stopped, abruptly, as if the entire formation froze mid-air. My friends fell silent. For several long seconds, the orbs hovered motionless, flickering as though they were caught between visibility and darkness. Then, one at a time, they blinked out. Not faded, not drifted away, just vanished. Alex cursed under his breath. "Dude, what did you do?" I lowered the flashlight, suddenly aware of how loud my heartbeat sounded against the soft hush of the waves. The beach was empty again, nothing but shifting shadows and the endless stretch of black ocean. We tried to salvage the night, but tension hung in the air like humidity. Eventually, we went back to the house, each of us pretending we weren't shaken. That was when the dream started. That night, I dreamed I was standing on the beach, alone. The lights weren't distant anymore. They circled me, hovering inches from my skin. Inside each orb I could faintly make out distorted faces, blurred, pale, mouths opening and closing like they were trying to speak underwater. But no sound came out, only the rush of the tide. When I jolted awake, the room was dark, and for a moment I swore I saw soft flickers behind the window, faint, moving, watching. On the third night we made a pact. No fire, no going outside, no drawing attention. We stayed in the cramped living room, a deck of cards spread out on the coffee table, though no one seemed particularly invested in the game. Every few minutes, someone would glance toward the windows, checking the shoreline. Around midnight, Jess stiffened. "They're back," she whispered. We rushed to the front window. The line of lights was there again, but this time they weren't far down the shoreline. They were close. So close we could see the sand shifting beneath them, small disturbances, as if something unseen was moving under the orbs. "They're on our beach," Alex said, his voice low and unsteady. We watched as the formation glided silently across the sand, stopping directly in front of the house. perfectly lined up, perfectly still, and then one of them broke away. The singular orb drifted forward, angling toward the porch, toward us. Panic hit like a wave. We scrambled to shut off the lights, plunging the living room into shadow. My breath hitched as I crouched beneath the window, heart pounding against my ribs. In the dim glow from the orb outside, I could see the outline of sand shifting near the steps, as if something was pressing down lightly, step by step. The orb floated to the window, right beside me. A faint glow seeped through the thin curtains, and then something touched the glass. A knock, soft, intentional, not accidental, not mechanical. A knock. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the light still seeped through my eyelids. I made the mistake of opening them again. A face stared back at me, pressed against the glass, pale and rippling like it was underwater. Its features were blurred, wrong somehow, too large, the mouth opening wider and wider in total silence. But though no sound came out, I felt something like a vibration deep in my chest, as if the air around me was being pulled inward. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the face dissolved into the glow. The orb flickered once and drifted backward. The others followed. One by one, they floated away into the darkness and disappeared. We left the next morning. No discussion, no arguments. Just a silent, mutual agreement that none of us were spending another night in that house. We packed in under 15 minutes. The walk from the porch to the car felt longer than it should have, each of us refusing to look at the beach in case the lights were waiting. On the drive home, Jess finally broke the silence. "My grandma used to tell stories about the lantern walkers," she said quietly. "Spirits of people who drowned, still walking the shore, searching for the living. They say if you stare too long, or if you let them see you." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. No one laughed. No one argued. We just listened to the road humming beneath the tires. We never talked about the lights again, not once in the years that followed. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm anywhere near a body of water, I catch myself scanning the shoreline, looking for that faint, flickering glow, praying it never comes back.